Anyway, you guys are three of the bravest kids I've seen in a long time. What are you guys, professional heroes or something?
We're greasers.
Are you kidding me?
No, I kid you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin-Lundberg, and I'm here with my right-hand woman, Becca Camerata.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, Bex, so good to see you. Love being in person.
I know, it's the best.
I want to apologize for my scratchy voice. Been suffering a little bit of a head cold, but we're getting through it. And as you know, I lose my voice 3 to 4 times a year.
You do, but it says a lot that I know that because you always still show up for work when you,
I know.
Have lost your voice.
And probably infect you.
This is probably why I have a very strong immune system. And I just want to say that you are so dedicated to this podcast that you are willing to do it even when you have no voice.
You know, it's our great joy.
Yes.
But today we're about to interview one of Hollywood's most legendary producers, Fred Roos.
He has produced so many incredible movies, so many classics in the canon of American film. But today we chose to interview him about the book then became the movie that gave our company its name.
Yes, Stay Gold Features. So we're going to talk about The Outsiders, and we know the very famous line from the book is "Stay Gold, Pony Boy, Stay Gold." It's actually derived from a Robert Frost poem, so there's multiple layers. But the premise of Stay Gold is just stay true, stay golden, stay sort of innocent and stay true to your ideology. And so it was a very famous line in the S.E. Hinton book and then subsequently the movie. But I think the most interesting and fascinating thing about this film is the casting process and discovering some of America's great actors, right?
Yeah, and I've heard in the past how fabled the casting process for this film was, but I don't know the details, so I'm really excited to hear about them.
Yeah, so let's get underway. I'll talk to you after.
Okay.
Fred, what is this glorious image behind you?
That's the Japanese poster by Eiko for Apocalypse Now.
Oh.
So that's the ocean, and there are some helicopters coming in.
That's a collector's item. How many people have that?
Very few. It was only for Japan.
Fred, forgive me. Did you also produce Apocalypse Now?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. I'm so thrilled to have you. You are an iconic producer to me and to many. Today, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of The Outsiders.
You call your company Stay Gold?
Yeah, we call our company Stay Gold, which is an obvious reference. But, today we're going to do a deep dive into that movie, but I kind of want to hear, because your road to producing was a little bit circuitous. As I've done a little research on you, Fred. I believe, you went to film school and started out as a casting director. So I kind of want to know sort of the cliff notes of your life before producing The Outsiders and how you and Coppola ended up sort of becoming a team. So can you take me back a little bit?
Went to Hollywood High School, if you can believe it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Anyway, went to UCLA Film School at a time when there were only 3 film schools that I know of.
Right.
USC, UCLA, and NYU.
Yeah.
I did my 5 months just bumming around Europe, hitchhiking around, staying in youth hostels. And then I knew I was going to get drafted. So I come back from Europe and I go in the Army for 2 years. And luckily, I made films the whole 2 years.
Wow.
So I had no relatives in the business. Finally, after 4 years of college and 2 years in the Army, you have to face up to how do you get into this business?
Yeah.
If you're not connected, have no godfather to help you. So I did the only thing I knew about it, applying to all the studios. That got me nowhere. I was going to do anything, a messenger or whatever, just to get inside the gate. A friend of mine that I got into film school with was working in the mailroom at MCA, which was the biggest agency in the world at that time. It's bigger than CAA today.
Wow.
He said, well, come apply here. I said, I don't want to be an agent. That's the last thing I want to be.
No offense.
But I had nothing else, so I applied, and they took me. I mean, you work in the mailroom, you know what that's like. But I had a fun time. I drove Marilyn Monroe to the airport and conducted screenings for Marlon Brando. It was a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah,
You paid. You could barely live on what they paid you. and they worked you long hours. Now, here's the big turn that worked for me. There were two companies that made what we call independent movies today, but they were low-budget, trashy movies. They weren't art films.
Okay.
That was Roger Corman and a guy named Robert L. Lippert.
Okay.
Lippert's company was financed by Fox.
Oh.
So this Herb Brenner guy said, that's going to be your studio to cover. It's too small time for me. I can't give them the time of day. It's too small potatoes. But you can see if you can get any of our clients some work there.
Okay.
Was over there 2 or 3 times a week. And eventually they said, would you like to come to work here?
Oh.
I said, you've been reading my mail. You're producing movies. That's what I planning to do all my life and what I went to film school for. Left MCA, went to work for them. So they made like a dozen, 15 films a year. I mean, really trashy, low-budget movies. They made me everybody's assistant, assistant story editor, and head of casting. And I had never been a casting director or even thought about it. I mean, I knew actors. I knew who had talent, who didn't. I just knew it instinctively.
Yeah.
But I had to get to know every agent in town. And I already knew how to make deals because I had been at MCA and they teach you that there.
Right.
Then I would go to all the little theaters and see all the new actors. And my door was open. I would interview 2 or 3 actors in general meetings every day just to get to know them. I knew that they were eventually going to let me produce one of those low-budget movies there. And they did.
Oh, I love this story.
There was a little interruption. There was a so-called Berlin crisis. I got recalled to the Army for 8 months.
Oh, wow.
But as soon as I came out, I was able to produce these 2 low-budget movies. And both of them starred Jack Nicholson. And Jack wrote the script for one of them. A guy named Monty Hellman directed them.
Oh, my God.
And we shot them both in the Philippines.
What?
Flight to Fury and Backdoor to Hell.
I'm watching them this weekend.
I guess if you go to my credits, and that's the first 2 films I ever produced.
And you had discovered Jack. I mean, that was your choice.
I become part of a circle of friends.
Okay.
Jack and Monty Hellman, Robert Towne, Carol Eastman, who wrote 5 Easy Pieces and many other things. We were a gang of film buffs. We would see the new French Wave film as soon as it came out, of the Italian films. We'd have dinner, hang out in coffee shops. That was my crowd.
Yeah.
So it was natural that I would want Jack to be in the stuff. I mean, he wasn't a star, but he was a working actor.
Yeah. So
this was a year in the Philippines getting these films made. It was everything there. Post-production was there. Almost entirely, the crew was Filipino, except my actors and my director.
Okay.
Came back from that, and I'm going to put another movie together. And I optioned a book with my own money called Drive, he said.
Okay. That
I wanted Jack to direct. That I couldn't get anybody to. Jack Nicholson, who's he? He's never directed. I couldn't.
I love it.
But I needed work and make a living. So another friend of mine that I'd been to UCLA Film School with was a nephew of Danny Thomas. He was an executive at Danny Thomas Productions.
Oh.
And they were doing a bunch of TV shows like That Girl, Andy Griffith, Gomer Pyle, a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I need another casting director here. I know you've done it. Come over here and I'll put you to work. So I was back in casting, not casting movies, casting Andy Griffith, I Spy, That Girl.
Right.
Then I got offered a big time movie called Petulia.
Yeah, great cast.
I kind of quit the TV shows. They took me with them. We shot it entirely in San Francisco. So I was in San Francisco for 2 or 3 months. And Richard Lester and I got on like that.
Okay.
He was the director. That movie was highly praised for its cast, for everything when it came out. And then I started getting calls from top directors, a lot of Euro directors.
Oh, wow.
So I was doing big-time movies with big-time directors, John Huston, George Cukor. And I didn't have to fight for it. They would call me. The word was kind of out. I was the guy for certain kind of films.
Got it. The guy with taste.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And but I still in my mind, I'm a producer, right? But I'm
Right.
making a living and
Right.
really owning the business. Jack suddenly became a star after Easy Rider. And BBS, that company that produced that, said, well, Jack, you can direct something now. What do you... Jack said, well, I don't have anything, but Rooster has this book that I like. That's what Jack called
Everyone
Rooster.
called you Rooster? I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you Rooster. I mean...
So put that together, and Jack insisted that I be at least an associate producer on it. So anyway, casting more films with top people. And then Francis had called me from time to time
Coppola.
without me ever having met him. Just a cold call. He would just call and I wanted to schmooze about actors. Who have you seen that's good these days? Who do you like? What do you think of so-and-so? I knew who he was, you know. He had a reputation, but the phone calls didn't lead to any point. They were just friends, conversations.
Yeah.
And then one day he calls and says, I got this job to direct this tacky book, this trashy book called The Godfather, which is a bestseller.
Yeah.
But he says, I think I can make something interesting out of it. You want to work with me on it? Do you want to cast it for me? I said, sure. And so, well, get on over and make your deal and let's go to work. And only then did I meet him face to face.
Oh, my God. After years of sort of sporadic combo.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I knew Tally pretty well. Talia Shire.
Okay.
Talia. And she may have been talking to him. She knew I was a fan of her work.
Talia is related to Coppola in what way?
Talia Shire is Francis' sister. Younger sister.
Yeah, okay.
She must have been talking to him about me as well, for all I know. So I cast The Godfather.
Unbelievable. I mean, that's got to be a story. That is so crazy. That I want to hear that whole story, but keep going. Keep going.
Despite what this stupid series is saying, The Offer, you heard about it?
I haven't watched it, but I've heard about it. Yeah.
I haven't watched it. I can't stand to watch it. Eventually, maybe I'll have to watch, but it would be too painful.
Probably.
I mean, it has somebody else casting The Godfather, not me.
You're kidding. Who did they give credit to in the series? Do you even know the person?
Andre Eastman. She was in-house at Paramount.
Oh.
Another very nice lady. And there had been several months, maybe a year of Godfather activity before Francis was hired.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And then when Francis was hired, he brought me over the same day. And it was just he and I did the whole thing. I would see her once in a while, but she had nothing to do with it. It was Francis and I.
That is so frustrating.
From what people tell me is in that thing, there's tons of other stuff that is all wrong and off and not true at all.
So that's where you and Francis commenced your working relationship. And then when did you become his, how did that transition
The next film was The Conversation.
And you transitioned to producer.
Yeah. And then after that, Godfather Part 2.
Oh my God. Let's cut to the context of The Outsiders, because at that point you'd been working with him for several years, I assume, as his producer.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So tell us how The Outsiders sort of came to be.
I'll give you a little bit of context for Francis at that point.
Okay.
We had been through 4 years of making Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God.
4 years from the time we got the idea to the time it was in theaters. That was 4 years elapsed of pre-production, a year and a quarter of shooting with a lot of interruptions by typhoons and heart attacks.
Martin Sheen had a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
Among others. Okay.
And a long, long post-production.
Oh, God.
This was before, you edited by moviolas and film. You had to spice it.
You had to cut the film together in order to see a sequence.
Yeah, so every time you would do a no cut, you have to wait a day and a half for the editor to put it together and then run it. So post-production, if you could afford it, went on for weeks and months and months. So when people talk about, we'll do post in 6 weeks, I says, are you crazy? I want a year. He was burned out by Apocalypse, but it turned out to be a hit.
Right.
But took a lot out of it. And then he did this very kind of experimental film that people didn't get called One from the Heart.
Oh, right.
Which was kind of a light love story, kind of a musical. We built Las Vegas with kind of miniatures, and people said, "Why didn't you just go to Las Vegas?" And
right.
That wasn't the idea. And that was received very poorly. Now people are relooking at it and says that was pretty interesting, pretty damn good in retrospect.
But Fred, financing those movies, or were you guys, or did you have backing from a studio?
We had a deal for a while with the people who were the remnants of United Artists.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and we're kind of going broke. One from the Heart costs a lot of money, a lot of it Francis' own money. And he wanted to get out of Dodge, get out of LA, get out of Hollywood. So The Outsiders didn't just happen immediately.
Okay.
We got this letter. Francis got this letter from this middle school in Fresno, California, a teacher named Joellen Misakian, a letter from the students with all their signatures, about 30 signatures. And it says, "We love this book, The Outsiders. We want it to be a movie, and we've chosen you to be the director of it." And there was a little dog-eared paperback copy of the book with kind of a trashy cover.
Okay.
I remember Francis said, "Isn't that cute that they sent this?" But he wasn't about to read it, or, right. You don't, but he tossed it at me, handle this or do whatever you want. So young adult fiction wasn't a thing yet. The cover looked like a lurid kind of trashy book, and not like a sensitive young adult novel, because that genre didn't exist. So I carried it around with me for weeks and weeks and months, maybe, saying to myself, well, someday I got to read it just to get it out of my hair. And one time I was on a flight, I think to New York for some reason. I decided to read it. I said, this could be a movie. I loved it. I mean, it was pretty simple, but it got to you. It touched you.
Right.
I told Francis about it. He said, well, let's try to put it together. And he had a filmmaker. I think he had gone to, Francis went to UCLA film school as well. I guess some guy he had gone to film school with who had never gotten off the ground as a director. We'll let him direct it. I found a screenwriter, a woman. I'd read a couple things.
What was her name?
She's on the credits.
Yeah.
There's a story there as well.
Okay.
I can't remember her name. I guess I don't want to.
Yeah.
It was an okay adaptation, but not great. So it was kind of languishing, and you could see Francis was really wanted to get out of town and just get away from all the money pressure and the studios and the bad reception for One from the Heart. So I said, well, why don't you read it yourself? Maybe direct it yourself. So he read it. He said, okay, I will direct it.
Oh, that is amazing.
Of course, he didn't like that script. I was the first one to ever meet Susie Hinton. I'm the one that optioned the book from her and talked her into it and got to know her. And then I entered his Francis tour, and they kind of did a screenplay themselves, the one that's shot. Then we had this long casting process, which will be part of this story, I guess.
Yes, please.
We'll
we got to go into that, yeah.
And went to Tulsa and made the movie.
We're early.
What do you want to do?
Nothing legal, man. Let's get at it.
It's like the mist is what's pretty, all gold and silver. Too bad it can't stay like that all the time.
Nothing gold can stay.
So Francis decides, this is going to be my next movie. He decides, Susie and I will just write it.
Yeah.
And did you immediately have backing for it? Like, how did that process get going?
We got that set up at Warner Brothers.
Okay. Just based on Francis and the book, and the screenplay, I assume, was done.
Yeah.
So you're greenlit. They're not requiring any big star because it's all young kids, right?
Yeah, it wasn't going to cost that much.
Okay. And so do you cast it, or do you hire another casting? Like, how do you guys run that process?
I had brought in a casting, two ladies, to the Zoetrope, the We were
Okay.
Francis' vision to have a fully operating movie studio like the old days, with
Cool.
a writers' building. So they were
In-house.
the in-house a lot. I mean, they did the grunt work of organizing tons of interviews. Bringing in every kid in town.
So you guys were in LA doing that, or in San Francisco?
By the way, before producing full time, I did cast American Graffiti with George Lucas.
Oh God, that's going to be another great story. I mean, what a cast that was. Harrison Ford, a young Harrison Ford.
Yep.
Oh.
Who I knew because he was doing carpentry work for me.
My God, what an eye you must have had. I mean, you still do, but that's incredible.
And about that time, I did Fat City with John Huston as well.
Oh, very cool. So get back to the casting, because it just was such a unique process.
So we saw every kid in town.
In San Francisco or in LA?
In LA.
Okay. You're running it out of
And
LA.
then eventually we did the same thing in New York.
Oh, wow. Okay, so talk me through, I want the nuts and bolts, how this all
So
came to
after
pass.
I would see the best of them or all of them with my casting people. I would choose the ones that were going to get tested. We knew we were going to do tests.
Okay.
And Francis decided to do the testing in a very different way than is done then or even is done now. He fixed up a soundstage on our studio, which is on Las Palmas, put a couple of chairs and a table, and all the actors who were up for it, and it was about 15 or 20,
Okay.
were told to come there on the same time, the same day, and be in the same room.
Oh, my God.
And we're just going to do scenes after scenes after scenes. Not like the regular thing. You wait in the outer office until it's your turn, then you come in and do your reading, and then you go home.
Right.
It was morning to night, 3 days of it.
Oh, my God.
And these kids had never been through casting like that, where they have to watch their competition.
Oh, my God.
Having to relate to a guy you're up against. You're sitting right next to him waiting for your turn to be called in.
And Fred, it was like a murderer's row of great young actors. I mean, like the actors you didn't cast. I mean, it feels like you launched so many careers, but it was Tom Cruise and Ralph Macchio and Patrick Swayze and I don't know who else, Mickey Rourke. And I just read it was like every young actor was there.
That's right. That's right. And they kind of embraced it, these kids.
Yeah.
Because Francis made it free-flowing. You want to try Pony Boy? Come on in. Do the scene as Pony Boy. You want to try Soda Pop? You can. A kid could say, let me try this. I mean, not at first. They didn't have the courage to do that until Francis gave them the freedom to try anything. And we knew we were going to do the same thing in New York.
Okay.
But we're going to fly certain ones to New York to participate with the New York ones.
Okay.
And we took Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, C. Thomas Howell. He wasn't C. Thomas Howell then. He was Tommy Howell.
Okay, Tommy.
He was only 14 or 15. And Darren Dalton.
Where was Matt Dillon in all of it? Was he LA or New York?
He's New York.
Okay.
So then fly them to New York, put them in a hotel, and then put them 3 more days of this with a bunch of New York actors, New York young actors.
Okay. Who are they?
And
do you remember any of those?
That group that we took to New York got parts.
Yep.
They all got parts. But out of New York came Matt Dillon and Ralph Macchio.
Oh, okay.
Diane Lane didn't have to come to these. I think we just did that as the old-fashioned way. Francis and I met her. I had seen her when she was about 6 or 7 years old. Do a play in Lincoln Center with Raul Julia and Meryl Streep.
Wow. She was a child actress. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm.
From a kind of bad family life. And then I had met her when she was about 11 or 12. Her manager took me to lunch with her. And so I'm having lunch with this 12-year-old girl. She had just done the Olivier movie.
Oh.
So I was on her case. I thought this girl's got the goods.
Right.
I don't think I had any other idea at all for Cherry.
For Cherry, yeah.
It was just going to be her. And Francis went along with my push, and
Yeah.
we were almost always in sync on things like that. So she didn't have to participate in these auditions. And she was only 16.
She really was young. She was that.
Yeah, she was the age of the character.
Perfect age.
So the cast was there except for Derry, the older brother.
Swayze.
Yeah. And we hadn't found anybody that really was right for it through all these auditions that really rang the bell. But I knew Patrick Swayze. I had seen a movie called Skate Town, USA.
Okay.
Which was kind of a B movie about roller skating. And he was the main lead in it. And he was pretty sexy and pretty good. And I asked to meet him, and I knew him. So I kind of had him in mind, but we hesitated because he was 30 years old.
He was older. Uh-huh. And Derry was only like 21,
he
right?
He would be 21 at the most.
Okay.
So I met him, introduced him to Francis, and he was kind of our safety, our fallback. And we didn't find in New York as well. So we went for Patrick.
He was great.
And figured we can make him look young enough. Right. I mean, you didn't question his look, did you?
No, not at all. I mean, he felt like the mature one, so it...
He was 30 years old and married.
Oh, my God.
But he had come from a ballet background. He had even a period of being a ballet dancer with one of the top companies in New York because his mother had been a dance teacher in Texas. So that's how the cast...
So you're cast and then you're off to Tulsa. I mean, you decided to go to Oklahoma, right? Like you decided to shoot it authentically. Yeah, because that's where it's set,
Tulsa.
I mean, it's very rare these days that you actually go to the actual location, especially if it's Tulsa, Oklahoma. But Francis was just all about authenticity, right? It was just like, that's where it's set.
It never crossed our minds not to do that, not to go there. I hate this thing where you can go fake some other place.
Yeah, you shoot everything in New Mexico. Yeah.
It shows. It shows subtly. It seeps into the film. Something's off.
Gotta get in with those socials. Stupid Johnny. We'll do it for Johnny.
So you go to Tulsa, you've got this fraternity of boys who are young and full of piss and vinegar. And tell me about how it was managing that. Like, and who were the personalities that were, like, how did it all blend and what do you remember?
Well, Francis made a point to try to separate the socias and the greasers.
Uh-huh.
Socias and the greasers on separate floors.
Okay.
And he gave the socias better rooms, more per diem.
Stop.
Access to the gym and the hotel. He made the greasers be second-class citizens among this group.
It's so method. Like you could never get away with that today, Fred. Like paying less to, one class over the other. I mean, it's so incredible.
Matt Dillon had already done a Susie Hinton movie.
Oh, right.
Which was called Tex, which was also shot in Tulsa, I believe. And plus he's a New York cool, New York hipster, Mm-hmm. He was kind of a god to these LA kids. The way he carried himself, girls come around, and he acted on that. He didn't just...
Right.
And they was, wow, that guy knows how to...
So did he teach the other young guys a few tricks? Was he sort of the leader of the crew?
As I remember it, not really.
Oh, okay.
He kind of did his own thing. He was friendly and nice and all that, but kind of colored himself as a little more of a veteran, a little more of a bigger star than you are.
Oh, interesting.
Already.
Uh-huh.
And Tommy Howell, see, during the course of the movie, he said, I'm going to change my name. I don't want to be Tommy Howell anymore. I'm going to be called C. Thomas Howell. I said, well, you're only 14, 15 years old. Isn't that a little pretentious?
Yeah.
And Tommy Howell's a nice name.
Yeah.
He stuck with it. He insisted.
He sure did.
But he was a little veteran himself because he was the son of a stuntman.
Oh.
So he had been around the business all his life.
Okay.
And he actually had a supporting role in E.T.
That's right. He was one of the buddies in E.T.
And he was very mature for his age. He could even help some of the other actors who were older than him. He had a calming influence, and he didn't get rattled. He was a perfect pony boy. And he had a long career afterward. I mean, he didn't become a giant star, but he never stopped working.
Right.
Tom Cruise was Tom Cruise that we know about at 19. Mm-hmm. Driven, in control, wanted to be in control, mm-hmm. Pleasant, not pleasant, but not quite somebody they would want to go have a drink with, because he didn't get that feel it would be fun. It was all kind of calculated.
There's a larger strategy there that really worked out.
I'll get to do a Tom Cruise movie, will I?
Fred, who did you sort of, because they all have great talent, right? They all have great talent. They all have great faces. Who stuck out to you as sort of like the most talented? Like you were just like, oh, this one.
All of them. I really liked Matt. I'm a friend of his to this day.
Yeah.
I've done 5 movies with Diane Lane. Mm. She's just wonderful.
Yeah.
To see her through all these years.
And how did she contend with all the boys? Like, was that sort of isolating for her, or did she enjoy it? Or I heard there were like a lot of pranks and shenanigans.
She was also a little veteran. She knew how to handle herself. She didn't have a parent with her. She had a professional guardian that you take on location.
Right.
I mean, all the boys were crazy about her. And
right.
I can't tell you if she and any one of them had a thing or...
Yeah.
I didn't stay in that hotel.
Right.
I had an apartment in Tulsa.
And so we're in Tulsa. We're beginning to shoot. How did Francis handle these young teenagers? Like, what was his style of direction, and how did the shoot go?
He had them do a lot of 2 weeks of rehearsal before we even shot a thing. We found this house that became the Curtis House. By the way, it's a museum now.
Right. I'd read that. Yeah.
It's the exact house where we shot. So it's a real tourist thing for Tulsa. So, anyway, he had the boys, the 3 brothers, stay there in this tacky, tiny little house in a bad part of town, and to cook and to do, cook their meals, to just live for like 24 hours as a family, as the 3 brothers. And there was a big rumble in the movie.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of rehearsal. We had great stuntman named Buddy Joe Hooker.
Okay.
Come in, who's done a lot of films with us, to rehearse the boys on choreographing that fight. Tom Cruise was probably the best athlete of all of them. He could do backflips. He could do everything.
Even over Swayze?
Well, Swayze as well, because he had
the dancing,
been a dancer, and he could move and all that.
I always love to ask the producers this, because you as a producer observe many directors, but directors don't observe each other. What sort of singular approach does Francis have that you've noted over the years? Like, what is his special sauce, if you could identify it at all?
Well, on every film, he tries some new thing, some new way of working with actors, some new way of rehearsal. So it's always kind of different for actors. They're dealing with a filmmaker unlike any they've ever encountered. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it takes some getting used to by the actors. And he has this thing that he created way early he calls it the Silverfish, which is a camper with all kinds of electronics in it, where he could see the set and see all the different cameras. Sometimes he would be in that trailer watching the scenes instead of next to the camera, which is a little disconcerting for actors. And then they would hear a voice coming in instead of him. We had tried, do this, do that, try another one this way.
Wow. But
the actors always had freedom to try something. If the actors ever wanted another take, let me try something crazy, Francis. Actors, if they're afraid, will give you a safe performance.
Right.
But if they're free and in good hands, the director's never going to put something on the screen that's going to embarrass them.
Right.
They have the freedom to try anything they want, and it might be the one you use, because it might be some fresh reading of it.
Yeah.
So that's a liberating thing for an actor. I'm in safe hands here. I'm in safe hands.
Right.
If I do something nutty or crazy in the take, he's not going to say, "Are you kidding me?" Or you crazy? You know, what is that stupid thing?
Right.
Never.
Right. I love that observation that he was a director who made them feel safe. So there was more dimension in the performance and maybe more courage. Fred, I have to tell you, I just not only was the story of this movie so fun and extraordinary, but also your story, your path to becoming one of our great producers was so much fun. So thank you so much for taking the time with me. I'm probably going to call on you again to hear some of the other films, but this is a good start for us.
Not over. Still doing it.
I know. You've got your meeting with Coppola, so go do that, and I'm going to go have my meeting with Spielberg, and we'll circle back.
Okay, anytime. I want to hear about your films. You're a good producer yourself.
Thank you. I try, but you light the way. You kind of inspire me. So thank you for that, and we'll talk more soon, Fred. You're the best.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 You smoke more than a pack today, and I'll skin you. You understand?
You carry more than one bundle of roofing at a time today, and me and Soda here will skin you. Understand?
Stay gold, pony boy. Stay gold.
So Bex, what a legend, huh?
Incredible. We definitely need to have him back on to talk about other films because his filmography is crazy. But
I know.
This was a really fun one. This was really fun to hear about him finding all these young, talented actors.
I know. I mean, I think the thing about Fred Roos is he's been in this business forever. The fact that he drove around Marilyn Monroe, but then produced some of the greatest movies of all time, including Apocalypse Now and Godfather 2. And, we chose The Outsiders because it's so relevant to who we are and our company's name. But we could talk to him for hours just about his experiences in Hollywood in the 70s and 80s.
It was a time that is historic for such good reason. That I would have loved to have just been a witness.
I know.
A fly on the wall in Hollywood at that time. It just seemed so cool and glamorous, and they were real movie stars. And it was really cool to hear some of those stories.
Yeah. And it just, in a way, it felt like a simpler time, I love the fact that, he was just buddies with Jack Nicholson, and Coppola would call him up on his telephone that he had in his home, how'd he get his number? I don't know. But they just formed this relationship, and he would ask his opinion about casting, and then they eventually became partners and continued to be partners for years and years. It's just amazing. But the other thing I thought that was interesting about The Outsiders is that it came at a time when Coppola's company was almost bankrupt. It was a really, he'd gone through such highs in the 70s and could do no wrong. And then I believe he was sort of coming off a bit of a low in his career. So I think The Outsiders sort of rejuvenated his faith in movie making, and all these young kids who were just willing to do so much to get the parts, and felt like it really reinvigorated him.
I think so much of the magic that comes across on screen when you watch that movie, because that book is so iconic and it has defined, a generation of kids. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was almost an impossible task trying to translate that to screen. And so when you hear about how intense and how intricate this casting process was, it kind of blew my mind on the one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like, oh, he had to do that, or else it just wouldn't have worked.
That's right. I mean, it's so funny because it's a book that still is beloved and assigned in all the middle schools and high schools today. It's one of the few novels that I've seen just throughout the years. I read it when I was in high school. My kids are now reading it. And I think the adaptation felt so true and reverential to the book. That's what's made it sort of stand the test of time. But I think Coppola and Fred were sort of aware of what they needed to achieve to make it a great film. And Coppola really seemed to put all the actors through the paces, right? Like, what struck you about that process?
Well, the fact that he had all these up and coming hot young actors come into the room and then read all the different parts and just pop around and really challenge themselves in a way that they probably weren't expecting and probably hadn't been challenged in any sort of audition before that. I think only the best of the best actors could have held their own in that room.
Yes.
And I think that was, again, I think that's what he needed to do to figure out who could play these parts and who could get this across on screen. So that was crazy to me.
No, it's incredible. And then you look at who he actually cast. It was Tom Cruise and Patrick Swayze and Ralph Macchio and Matt Dillon and Emilio Estevez. I mean, truly great actors who have truly become the best actors of our time. They identified that early on. So it was obviously a process that really paid off and prepared these guys for the things to come. Oh, not to mention Rob Lowe. I forgot about Soda Pop, the most beautiful guy ever. And Diane Lane, Cherry. Oh my God. She was epic as well. Yeah. And Bex, you and I recently saw a theater adaptation of the film and book, which will, I assume, come to Broadway soon, but we also thought that was incredible as well.
Yeah, I think this is one of those, I was going to say properties, and that sounds so like businessy, but you know, we do call it intellectual property, and that's what it is. But this is one of those stories, it's a better phrase, this is one of those stories that has lived so many different lives and seen so many different iterations, and that's how you know it's one for the ages. You know, the fact that it was a book that, like you said, is still being read by kids in school today, and that inspired a movie by one of our greatest directors, and that launched the careers of so many of these young actors, and then inspired the name of our film company that's making movies now, and then also inspired this musical that's in development and will hopefully go to Broadway because it's really good. It's just such a testament to S.E. Hinton's work, and the fact that Francis Ford Coppola carried that on and made a fantastic rendition of that on film. Like, that was, I'm sure, so hard. It's just, it really is pretty incredible, the lasting impact of this story.
So Bex, in our own casting process, is there one movie that sticks out in particular that felt like a really unique casting process that really paid off for us in the end because it was sort of breaking the barriers of how people normally do it?
For me, that was when we did Honey Boy with Shia LaBeouf, and we had to cast the actor to play the young version of Shia, when he was a kid. And I remember talking to you about this because I had grown up on Even Stevens, and Shia in that show was crazy and was so specific, and I was like, no, we have to watch some of this so you can understand what he did. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before, and he was just doing these wild, crazy, outlandish things on this show, and we had to find a kid who could do that, who could act like he was acting like Shia in this show, but then also be the real version of young Shia, who had a very, very difficult upbringing and a very hard relationship with his father. And so that's such a tricky thing to find.
So hard.
And it was very important to Shia and the director, Alma Harrell, that we find a kid who was really authentic. Yeah. And so they really wanted to discover someone and did a lot of just street casting. Yeah. You remember that process?
I do remember that. And I remember the sort of like left turn we took on that process when we realized that while in theory discovering some young kid who sort of had that feral nature that we were sort of interpreting as Shia's nature as a kid, in theory felt like a really good idea, we realized very quickly that we needed a trained young actor to sort of match Shia's ability and wits, because Shia never stays in one place. He doesn't like keep his marks. His process is all about feeling authentic in the moment. So while that authenticity may feel like he's sitting down in one shot, maybe the next take he's standing and in your face. And we realized very quickly that we needed to cast someone as skilled as Noah Jupe, who we ultimately cast as a young Shia, because Noah could sort of hang with Shia's different moods and energy and was able to play with him in that way. That was someone who had been trained, who was actually an English actor. You would never know that from the performance because he pulls off such an amazing American accent. But it's interesting to go through the process and really have a trained actor as skilled as Shia play against these young boys, because you have to be up for the challenge to meet his energy and his level of talent. And so that was a real lesson for us in casting.
I remember watching some of those tapes, and it was just, they were fascinating to watch Shia and some of these young actors. Should we also talk about the Beasts of No Nation?
Well, it's so funny you were going to say that, because I felt like the other really challenging casting process was Beasts of No Nation, the movie we did with Cary Fukunaga and Idris Elba. And really the only trained actor that we had hired for Beasts of No Nation was Idris, who was half Ghanaian. We shot the movie in Ghana, and Cary was just insistent that we were going to cast every single actor out of Ghana, and they were all children. And so we had to find an actor who could carry the entire film, who had literally never been on a film set or even close. I mean, didn't even know what cameras looked like. And so we found this brilliant young boy named Abraham Attah on a soccer pitch in the middle of Accra. And he was living in a small house with his brothers and sisters and his family. And we literally plucked him out of obscurity. And I'm like so proud, because Abraham is now a freshman at college at Tufts. And like, we literally changed his entire life. And I'm so proud of who he's become. And he's like this young 21-year-old man now.
Wasn't he cutting school when you found him on the soccer field?
I think Harrison, our casting director, who literally we sent out on a bike to go all over Accra and find kids and put them on like his iPhone, said that he was cutting school at the time. But he was also around all his buddies, so maybe that was just like lore that we had created.
It's a good story, whether or not it's true. But maybe they were all cutting school. Who knows? All
right, Bex, I think we've really run it out this time. Thanks so much. This has been so fun.
It's been great. Should everyone follow us and subscribe and review and all that stuff?
Yeah, guys, don't forget to subscribe. You can find us at Stay Gold Features on Instagram, staygoldfeatures.com, and we'll see you next time.
See everyone next time. Stay gold.
Bye.